Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in Europe.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American
Scouser.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV's Premier League show. I am joined this week by Macka in the rotating guest chair, who will fill in for Paul Bickler on a Monday night. Mr. Macka, thank you for joining us tonight. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, do you want me to answer as Macka or as Bickler? As Macka, I'm okay.
No,
As Bickler, everything's miserable. No, only kidding.
I was going to say, you should answer as Macka, because if you answer it as Bickler, well, you know, the viewership might just go through the roof.
No, I'm good.
We will we'll get right into it here, as we always do, taking a look at match week 12, really looking at the fixtures themselves. We'll go round robin here a little bit. I figure we would start with the first match of the weekend, Tottenham versus Wolves at Molineux. Gary O'Neill's boys showed up ready to take on Big Ange and his army, as I like to call them. It's Ange's army, and it has nothing to do with Spurs. It's the media that Ange has behind him writing psalms and just hymns. Sorry for all the religious talk for a man who films Jesus all day. But I think in some ways it is funny. People say to me all the time, like, why is Ange getting treated so well by the British media? You know, they would have vilified anyone else for attacking and playing against Chelsea the way they did. And I was like, well, this is the telltale first thing in media, right? If you're respectful to people in the media and you answer their questions, they will usually do right by you. It's how Arsene Wenger got away being a surly prick for 25 years, but everyone described him as a gentleman, right? Like, the only person that ever truly disliked Arsene Wenger was his tube jackets, because he would get in a fight with one of them each and every single time. I feel like the only tactic that Arsene Wenger never could overcome is a double-breasted zipper. Like, I think that is something like a reversible jacket is probably his biggest nightmare. But I am sure wherever Wenger was on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, wherever it was, he was probably sipping a nice glass of red and laughing at his foes from Tottenham. Maybe the most Spurs-like performance you could ever have. You score 3 minutes in, and you find a way to take it all the way to stoppage time without dropping another one in. And then you concede 2 in a matter of 8 minutes after checking off twice. Is this more down to the injuries, to the fact they were playing second team starters who can give you 45 good minutes, but 80, 90 minutes in, that mental awareness isn't there to stay checked in? Or is there a bigger problem at foot for Ange and his Spurs?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that, like, Ange seems to, the entire secret of his media loving is just that his use of the word mate. Because he can be quite spiky with them, but he just says mate at the end of it. Oh, good night, mate. Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question. From Australia, we don't answer questions like that. It was a stupid question, mate. And then everybody loves him. It's fantastic. If Brendan Rodgers could have figured that out, he'd still be at Leicester right now. They'd be vilifying Leicester for firing him. But we said on the Thursday show that Spurs, I certainly believe Spurs are to be found out at some point, because it was the same in Scotland. If he was at any other club other than Celtic, he would have lost a lot more games than he did, because teams did start to figure them out. And if you talk to Celtic fans, they were often furious with him that he wouldn't change things. Like, when teams had figured out the high line, he wouldn't change the suit to match that. So that was kind of the downfall against Chelsea. But against Wolves, it's I wouldn't put Gary O'Neill up there in the upper echelon of the coaching fraternity. But he's not a stupid coach. He did a good job with Birmingham and then got the round shaft from them for keeping them up. He's a decent coach. But Ange's tactic is there to be seen for everybody. He's not going to change. He's like Martin O'Neill. He's like the fancy Martin O'Neill. You know what's going to happen. If he gets a team playing against it, he'll do very well. The injuries don't help, of course, but second string is being coached to play the same way as the first string is. So they're still going to have the same deficiencies, despite obviously the lower quality than the starters. But I think it's interesting how different they are without James Maddison, because I would have loved Maddison to go to Liverpool after Leicester. I think he's a good player. He seems a bit of an ass as a personality. Like, he has that kind of cheekiness about him that we would associate with Chelsea players. But he's still a talented player, and somebody I think we could see from years and years, somebody needs to get Son going. It was Kane previously, and if they didn't have Maddison, they I don't know where they would be, but Maddison seems to have that good connection with them, hence their good run of form so far. But Ange never changes. He's going to be the exact same man. He's the Australian Andre Villas-Boas almost. It's going to be the same thing, and when it works, and it works great. But when it doesn't, it's going to fall apart. And I think more teams are going to look at what Wolves did and go, oh, we can do a bit of that. We can just keep going at them. They're going to mess up somewhere, and they're going to give up, and they're going to Spurs it, because that's who they are, no matter who manages them.
Don't you dare compare Andre Villas-Boas and those scarves and that beautiful beard. I always used to joke with my buddy. He's a Spurs supporter, and he wasn't excited when they hired him, but he was like, hey, the guy was good at Chelsea. To be fair, he was actually a good manager at Chelsea, and he was building something at Chelsea. In classic Chelsea fashion, they blew him out before he could figure it out and then let someone else win with his team. But, you know, it was just something about the combination of the hair, the beard, and then the enormous scarf. Like, the man looked like he was ready for the front cover of GQ, like almost like Mancini does, but Mancini did it with crazy eyes, and Villas-Boas did it with like a je ne sais quoi type of an attitude, right? And like,
and the voice. And the voice helped.
The voice definitely. Well, the voice played right into the beard. So
yeah, it did. And he was only 15 years old. People forget that.
You should probably stop. We talked about this before, you know, with the Catholic part of it. You should probably stop. You ever hear that line? It's a good one from Tom Rennie. He told it when he first started at TalkSport. He was like doing like a Europa League preview. And he said, I've been watching a lot of their videos, and I really like young boys. And literally his computer, he said that his computer started to shut down, and literally he was supposed to go live on air in like 20 minutes to do like his first ever feature, and he couldn't because he was literally sitting in the HR department at TalkSport because they wanted him to explain why he said those words on air. Oh, that is an outstanding one. I really like young boys. So don't clip that, John. But let's see here. If we talk a little bit more here, we'll wrap up the Wolves game on this. Do you think this match, though, comes down to Ange getting his substitutions wrong? Because one of the things I know I saw a lot of Spurs supporters arguing about was they didn't understand why he took off Pape Sarr to bring on Betancourt. And I can understand that one because he thinks Betancourt is the better of the players and will eventually be a starter when he's fit. But I don't understand why you take Basuma off and bring in Lo Celso when you're holding a 1-0 lead. And then you take off Johnson and you bring in Brian Hill, who has never played defense in his life. So it's almost like you went more attacking up 1-0 as the game and the match got late. And it just felt like a guy who doesn't have any tactics to close out a game, who the only way he knew to defend was to try to score a second goal. And I just don't think that that's a sustainable item if you're trying to win trophies in a league like the Premier League, is it?
I mean, I mean, first of all, if I was 10-0 up, I still wouldn't put Lo Celso on. Like I wouldn't, even with a second to go, he stays on the bench. He's an idiot. But that's what I'm talking about with the Celtic fans. Ange would continue to try and score goals. even if the game was put away. Like we used to have it same like when I played when I was a fat pub league player, as opposed to the svelte young model that I am now, from a manager who said, why are you trying to win the game twice? Like you've got your 1-0, see out the game, and it's coming near the end, and that's that. You don't have to win it again. But that's not Ange's way. Ange's way is to continue to attack, which is why I compared him to Villas-Boas, because he did the same kind of thing. He just understood attacking football, and Villas-Boas was the Portuguese Kevin Keegan. Just to keep the chain going.
My favorite part is you got one of these for everyone. Before you know it, you're going to tell me that Kevin Keegan was the Ukrainian blah blah blah, who was the German blah blah blah. You'll bring it all the way back to probably Joe Mourinho is. Yeah, I'm sure you'll get back to Martin O'Neill. That's just usually what happens with Irishmen.
but I think it's Ange. Big Ange is an out-and-out attacking manager, and I think you are correct. I don't think he knows how to close out a game. He's not a tactical manager, this is the Martin O'Neill comparison. Martin O'Neill doesn't know how to change games. He never did. But he had him for Ireland. He did a good job for one campaign. Got us into the World Cup, I want to say, the European Championships. But there's it was the same thing. If plan A wasn't working, let's switch a few players out and continue plan A. And that'll be it. And then when that plan A doesn't work, let's go to plan A3, which is the same one, but just with substitutions. And that's where he's going to get found out, because they're not all stupid managers. Like, I mean, we'll get to, I'm sure, but Dyche is starting to look like he knows what he wants to do with that Everton team now. I could see somebody like him causing Ange problems, because those types of managers develop their game plan around what their opposition are going to do, and they try and nullify them first. And I think that's what's going to happen to Ange. He's going to get nullified as managers look at his Spurs team more and more and see that he just doesn't change. And it's gonna be fun to watch if you don't like Spurs. I don't mind Spurs. I just think they literally are the Spursiest Spurs team of all Spurs teams ever named in any sport ever.
I will say, I think to your point, I think that's what Gary O'Neill did. He genuinely set up the fact that he wasn't going to allow them to beat him with fluidity. He was defensive. He was stout. Yes, they got the early one, but they never really created a clear-cut chance after that. And he stuck around and he just waited for them to make mistakes. I mean, they turned off twice, once on a throw-in, once on a free kick, and they got punished. And it's really embarrassing, to be honest. Well, speaking of a manager who maybe gets too much credit for his tactics and not enough critique for not changing them, Erik ten Hag gets another lackluster 1-0 victory. It took a late Bruno Fernandes goal last time out to pick up the victory. I think it was against Fulham. And to be totally honest, it was poor goalkeeping, in my opinion, by Bernd Leno in that match. They play Luton at home. Give Luton some credit. They showed up again and were resolute and tough to break down and tough to beat. But United offered nothing. And at times, they made Luton look like an actual football team. And I didn't think that could be done. And to do that at Old Trafford and once again require, a nothing burger of a goal to show up from Victor Lindelof in a set piece, papering over the cracks, Macka, or more problems than United are willing to actually address when it comes to Ten Hag and the way that the players are responding to his tactics on the pitch.
Well, I watched that game, and if Luton had a goal scored, they'd have won that 3-0 easily. Like, they just don't have a finisher. It's almost like if they could just buy Mitrovic and have him do for them what he did for Fulham, they'd be flying. They'd have no problems at all. But they can't score. But it looked like, to me, a mid-table game. It looked like a early April mid-table game against two teams that are just trying to possibly, if they're lucky enough, get into the Europa League places or the Conference League places now. If they're lucky, they're just a dreadful team at Manchester United. And they remind me of I don't want to say Liverpool at all at any age or any year, because we always looked like we were just nearly about there. We just couldn't get over the final hurdle till Houllier and Benitez and that came in. But they look like Swansea under Brendan Rodgers. There's an attempt. Well, no, Brendan Rodgers actually could get his plan through. To be fair, Eric Ten Hag doesn't have that thing going for him. But just a team that if they're in mid-table, they're going to be happy. There's no ambition in the players. There doesn't seem to be any authority in Ten Hag to get his ambition across. And anytime Harry Maguire looks like a competent footballer, should cause any manager to scramble back to his tactical notebook and say, I have to rip this up and start again, because that's just not on. It's fun to watch for us. But if you're a United fan and you think that was a good victory and that's the turning point, then you're delusional and you need to stop taking the mushrooms and start microdosing on reality, because Luton could have taken them easily had they had somebody who knew where the goal was. And it's not sustainable, I don't think, for United. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a momentous drop around about or just after Christmas, and then Eric Ten Hag says his goodbyes.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, do you expect Ten Hag to be there at the end of the campaign? It sounds like you're not even sure Ten Hag will be there by the end of the calendar year.
I mean, just if they keep playing that way, more teams are going to pick them off. I don't know what their schedule is like. They haven't. Am I right in saying they've had a lot of easier games so far, and they
have some tougher fixtures coming up in December. Obviously, they have to play us. He definitely needs to make sure he's not on a shellacking from us, because that will probably be one of the last nails in the coffin, as it often is.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, quickly here, we'll kind of wrap up on United, announcement recently coming out that it looks like the Sir Jim Ratcliffe merger, or whatever you want to call his 25% minority stake ownership that he is purchasing, and that he will be taking over day-to-day operations within the club. Does that, some people always say you get a bounce when the coach, right? Like a bounce when you bring in a new sporting director. Even though the Glazers are still 75% in control and still carrying the debt and still carrying the weight of the problems at the club, could having a new voice running football operations, whether that's a new manager or not, help just breathe some fresh air into the players, either by forcing some dead weight out or bringing in some new purchases of guys they want? Like, I personally do not believe that this will work. And I don't think that it will actually have that much of an impact on the pitch. This feels like the Glazers placating the angry supporters. Do you see a world where this is an advantage to United to get Sir Jim Ratcliffe in there?
No, I think it's almost like he's paying an enormous amount of money comparatively to get in the director's box for the game days. Like that's essentially what it seems to be to me. I can't see what impact he's going to have. If he's going to try and take over football operations, then do lots of it, because I don't see how it's going to work for them. Like they're so rotten from top to bottom and from inside to out that it would really take a Saudi Arabia takeover kind of deal where you can have limitless amount of money to wipe the whole slate clean, get rid of a bunch of players, bring in some top players, and then bring in a top manager who can get that whole scenario working for them before they'll start having an impact. This will make all the United fans happy. They'll all talk about like the new dawn and the new era in much the same way we did when we got rid of Hicks and Gillette, except theirs was actually real. And theirs would just be like a bit of a fantasy, because it just reminds me of the Michael Knighton thing from years and years and years ago, from the 80s, when he went out and juggled the ball a few times, and then that whole deal collapsed and he was no longer the savior of Man United. And that just is such a typical Man United thing to happen. It's all show. They've always been, with the exception of Alex Ferguson's years, prior to that and post that, they've been all style and no substance. That's always, to me, been what Man United have been about. They've all been about show, whereas we weren't about show. We were like a provincial club almost still under Shanks and Paisley and that, but we just swept up the honours because we kept it real, as they say, like the kids do.
Well, we are going to talk about Chelsea Man City like the kids would do, teams that have semi-fraudulent supporters bases that just like winning when you spend lots of money. Sorry if I just insulted any of you who just became a City fan last week. No, I'm not really sorry. But another supporters group that I've been known to insult in the past, which I guess I got to apologize to, probably pulled off the shock result of the entire weekend, that being the men of the South Coast at AFC Bournemouth showing up and finding a way to pull out a win at the Vitality Stadium against Newcastle. No question, Newcastle has been hit with the injury bug pretty severely. We're missing a couple players due to red card accumulation or yellow card accumulations. And of course, then lost Miguel Almiron, basically their Energizer bunny, which when you're down players, the last thing you want to do is lose the guy who does all the pressing and sets the go, especially when you have to play Gordon through the middle. Because, as much as it pains me, Anthony Gordon has really come on as a key contributor to this Newcastle side success. Is this all about Eddie Howe's men laying an egg on the South Coast and losing it? Or, as the underlying numbers showed, should Bournemouth be proud of the fact that they ended up coming out of that game with an XG higher than the 2 goals they scored, and they were really an attacking side on the front foot the entire match, taking it at Newcastle at home? Who takes more out of this match? Bournemouth with hope for survival? Newcastle with the idea that this is a blip based on injuries and schedules?
Well, first of all, I think Bournemouth can take a lot of credit for it. But on the other hand, it's kind of like a yin and a yang thing. We said on the Thursday pod a while back, and we might have actually said it. One of the things me and you did together was getting into Europe and playing in the Champions League is something Eddie Howe has never had to deal with in his entire life. Not as a coach, not as a manager, and not as a player. I don't think. So this is all new territory to him, and he's finding out, as Brendan Rodgers did when he had to cope with Europe for the first time, you cannot do the same things that you did for 10, 15, 20 years previously. You have to learn a whole new game. And that's why it's always important to have somebody on your staff who has done all that stuff, so they can say, do you know what? This league game, sit some of the starters. We might lose it, we might draw, but if we want to do something in the Champions League, we're going to have to preserve that. Or vice versa. We're not going to win the Champions League, so let's not kill ourselves trying to. I think he's trying to be clever. He's trying to work it out, and he'll probably need another 2 or 3 European campaigns before he figures it out. Or he could be like Brendan Rodgers and never figure it out at all after several. But I think he's getting caught out with that, and that's contributing to the injuries and probably contributing to the card accumulation, because the players are fatigued, and fatigued players tend to make more fouls and get themselves into more trouble. So I think it's two sides of the same coin. I think Bournemouth did themselves credit. I think they've got a new approach, and they're probably buying into it now. But Newcastle are another Spurs. They're going to get found out, not in tactical terms in this sense, but more in terms of how a manager manages that schedule, because it is different and it is intense.
Do you see them dipping into the transfer window in January and allocating some of the funds and bringing in some reinforcements for that side, especially knowing that they're going to be without Tonali for the remainder of the calendar year?
It's possible, but then if they go too far into it, 3 or 4, maybe, if they thought that's what they needed, then they're going to have to integrate those 3 or 4 in, so the process starts all over again. Which is probably a part of the reason, I know we always complain year on year out when we don't buy anybody in January when we're sorely needing it. But Klopp probably thinks, I don't want to have to integrate these players in and not get any value out of them until the last 3 games of the season, when it can wait till June, get them then, and then have them flying on the first day of the new season. But again, Eddie Howe has not been in this position before. He's literally been sweeping up the floor, looking for players at Bournemouth to actually play for him. So I could see them doing it, but I don't know whether it would be successful if they did.
So I transition here to the table. This is the top half of the table. Chelsea with their impressive draw against City and getting that point, and the win against Spurs. It was a big week for Poch, actually, to pick up 4 points out of those 6. Get himself into the top half. I know it's nowhere near where Chelsea wants to be, but I think when you start to actually break down some of the performances, and we'll talk more about Chelsea when we go through that ridiculous masterclass, and it was fun to watch that City match. And if anyone hasn't watched it, don't just watch the extended highlights. Watch the whole 90 minutes of ridiculousness, because it is basically everything you need in a football match with quality on hand. The Spurs versus Chelsea match on Monday was everything you needed in a football match, including the theater of the absurd. 10 goals and 5 chalked off, 2 red cards and 2 more that should have been given. But this was just craziness in itself. West Ham, don't know what to make of West Ham. They really had no business winning. I think their XG was under 1, and they scored 3 goals, and they get a win. And if I'm a West Ham supporter, I'm begging management and ownership, just give David Moyes a nice send off, put his name up in the Ring of Honor for bringing a European trophy. And I'm thinking to myself, just hire me a De Zerbi, hire me a Graham Potter, get me a manager who at least wants to, who at this point would be trying to institute moving forward. Jared Bowen, Paqueta, Kudus, these aren't lump it up guys. These are footballers who can play. Even some of their defenders have some skills in them. They have attack-minded wingers. I mean, they have Maxwell Cornet that was at Burnley. He was a really good player. He was too good for them when he was there. They could have some players that I think they could do a lot with, and I just feel like they're just kind of wasting it away. And Brighton and United, we've touched on them. Let's focus on this top 5. How shocked are you, 12 matches in, that we are looking at a 5-team race within 3 points of the top? And that's really what we have here, whether we believe in Villa, Spurs, Arsenal, even Liverpool for that matter. Is this say more about the points that City has dropped, or kind of the quality sides that Liverpool and specifically Arsenal have really turned themselves into this season?
I think that City are definitely a lot more vulnerable this year than they were last year. I think that's obvious. But I want to make sure we give credit to Villa, because the manager there is a good manager. He's not maybe Champions League legend level possibly yet, but he's a very good manager. And I think what we're seeing in that top 5 is a tale of the managers. Because there's not everybody has the massive budget. Villa certainly don't have the massive budget. Spurs, I don't think, have a massive budget. Arsenal are deceptive. They always look like they don't have the best budget, but they spend some money. And we spend money, but we don't have cash-rich nations backing us. So I think it's if you separate Villa from United downwards, it's a tale of good management, of managers who know what their plans are. We might not like Lego Head. I don't like Lego Head at all. But he knows what he wants his team to do. And a lot of managers, we talked about Moyes. Moyes doesn't know what he wants his team to do. And he's been in the game 30-odd years as a manager thereabouts, if not more. And you still can't pinpoint what's a West Ham side like right now. What's a David Moyes side like? It's they're going to defend in depth. But after that, as you say, they have the players to play an attacking game. They don't do it. So I think it's a credit to the managers and by extension, the club owners or whoever hires the managers to take risks on some of them. Because Arteta was a risk, really, when you think about it. He had no pedigree other than as an assistant, and that doesn't always work out. Ange was coming from Celtic. That would have been laughed at like a few years ago to take over a Spurs team. But no matter what their flaws are, all of those managers have a vision, and all of their players are going to play to that vision because they can get buy-in. It might come down to resources in the end, though. I think, between us and the City, we have the mental, intellectual resources, and they have the money resources, plus some intellectual ones. Because I can't not give Pep Guardiola credit as much as I hate.
Yeah, he's a pretty good manager.
Yeah, he's a great.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely when it comes to Unai Emery. I think I had said last year at one point on our Monday night pod, I genuinely believe that he's the third best tactical manager in the Premier League. Like, I think he sits right behind Klopp and Pep, and I don't think he's that far behind tactically. I think his man management skills still lack, which is why you see him as more of a coach, which is why he does so good with the little engines that could, like Sevilla and Valencia and Villarreal and the different clubs that he's, taken every one of them, it feels like, to go win the Europa League. He clearly can outcoach other managers on a one-off game, as well as he's proven that he is maybe the world's best, one of the best knockout managers of any manager in elimination tournaments. I've always argued, I think, that he was on his way to success at Arsenal, actually, and was just not given enough time. People forget that they all called Arteta a genius in his first year, like his first 12 months on the job, and he got less points per match than Unai Emery did in his time there. They just, once again, they couldn't handle it because he was a mouth breather, because he couldn't speak English, yet he refused to use a translator. So his press conferences were long and confusing, and it allowed the writers to basically write what they thought he was trying to say in his third language. And it didn't work. And let's be honest, you can't judge any manager for their time at PSG. Because I feel like it's just a place where good managers go to die. Now, I could be proven wrong, because I almost feel like Luis Enrique is the perfect manager for PSG. Because, I think any grown man that wears ripped jeans on the side of a football pitch just gives two bleeps about what his players or ownership or the supporters think. So he might be able to handle the pressures that come with being in France. Like, the last manager that looked comfortable there was Carlo Ancelotti, and that was because it was before they had any real expectations. They were just trying to actually compete in the Champions League, let alone actually win one. It was after him that you brought in the Tuchels and the Pochettinos, where it was like, we're just going to find a manager who can win this. It'll be interesting to see how this side does. But when we transition over to the bottom half of the table, and, it's funny, there isn't much to talk about, in my opinion, between 11 and maybe even 16, 17, because I really do believe that most of these teams are safe. How bad is this bottom three?
Firstly, just got from the bottom up. I'm not shocked by Burnley, and it's almost a superstitious thing, because there was the whole thing of Vincent Kompany. He was a classy player, and he's going to be a classy manager. Look at the great job he did getting Burnley up into the Premier League. But it's a different beast. If you're not making the right moves, even from the day you're promoted, then you're going to be in trouble. And he doesn't have the coaching chops to get his team out of it. So I'm fully expecting them to go down, and probably to be giving up the ghost by Christmas. To be sort of let's start thinking about how we're going to cope in the Championship again, and start running down some contracts. Sheffield United, they're such a nothing team. They don't. The way there's some teams that are in the relegation zone all year, but they're playing great football. They're just not getting any luck, and you want them to do well. And they're just an exciting, any Tony Mowbray team. They look great, but they're going to end up going down, and you feel bad for them because they're trying to play it the right way. Sheffield United, there's nothing about them. I don't know anything about them. They're not exciting at all. Luton, I'm still convinced I'm still convinced Luton Town are wearing the tight shorts from the 80s, because that's all I ever remember from Luton Town is the tight shorts and the tight shirts with Umbro all over them from 1982. That's when I remember Luton from. But nice result against us aside. It's going to come down to, as we can see, it's going to come down to goals for all of those three teams. And I don't see any of them having anybody who can score goals. So I think the bottom three, maybe Bournemouth sneaking in there. after Christmas would be the three to go down. But there's just nothing about them. There's no like, you're not hoping against hope that one of them can make it because there's something likable about any of them. They're just three awful teams.
And I think that's where I struggle with it is, everybody knows, I love to poke a little fun at the Bournemouth supporters, all 5 of them here in the United States, and all my inside jokes that I've been using for years on these podcasts. The truth is, when Eddie Howe was at Bournemouth, they were fun to watch. They played attractive football, and they proved that even as a small club, you can progress and move up the table. And that ship ran its course, and that happens. I will say, when you start to watch them the last few matches, you start to see what the manager is looking for. And though I think Gary O'Neill was just so hard done by Bournemouth, and it was just wrong what they did to him, I can understand where, I was making the comments earlier about David Moyes and not progressing and how the ownership wanted a brand of football to be proud of along with the results. I think that's what they went for when they went with the foreign manager. The difference with Bournemouth is I think Dominic Solanke, though he's not a world beater and he's not a top 6 striker, he's proven he's a Premier League striker. He can score double-digit goals in the Premier League.
Yeah.
And for that, if he can stay healthy and they can keep the Semedo kid, who has turned out to be a really smart, quick signing and good player, I think Solanke gives them just enough to see them over the line. I mean, I will say this. If you're asking me what teams here might be pulled into this, I think there's a chance that Fulham and Forest have chances of being pulled into this thing, especially Fulham, if they were to go on like 2 or 3 more bad results, because Fulham doesn't score enough goals. As you can see, they only have 1 goal more than Burnley. And it still doesn't look like Marco Silva has ever gotten over ownership allowing Mitrovic to leave. He looks angry. He looks disheveled. He almost looks like he's playing this one out, trying to just get to the end of the year. He doesn't want to redo his deal. So, if he were to ever leave there, I could see Fulham maybe being the surprise team. Last year, I always thought at some point Brentford might get sucked in or Forest would get sucked into the drop zone area, and it never materialized. The one I agree with you is for all the Liverpool fans and supporters that wanted to poke fun at their Everton buddies and brothers and cousins, in my opinion, barring something catastrophic, I think Everton is almost safe now because Dice is showing he's put his footprint on that team, his imprint enough. And if Dominic Calvert-Lewin's healthy, again, he's not great, but he's going to score enough goals to keep them up. So we always talk about this. Normally it's happened by now. So believe it or not, here we are, November 13th, the 2nd or 3rd international break of the young season. And we still haven't had a manager relieved of their duties yet since the start of the Premier League season. So the sack race is on. Betting favorites for the top 6 are on your screen right now. I ask you, who will be the first of this list to find their way to the unemployment lines?
I can only see between Heckenbottom and Company. And it depends on whether Burnley, how much in love with Company Burnley are. If the ownership are it's nice to be up here, but we knew we weren't going to, we'd have to make some big movements that we couldn't afford to keep in here. So we're happy with you, Vincent, as long as you get us back up again if we get relegated. If he has that, I think he's fine. But if they're borrowing money off the fact that they're in the Premier League for a few years, he's going to go at Christmas. Because they can't afford to drop if they are doing that stupid thing that a lot of these clubs sometimes do, where they think that once they're in the Premier League, the trapdoor closes permanently and they get to stay there, and then they start buying players or paying wages they can't afford. Leeds from way back when. Heckingbottom, he's not enough of a personality, so Sheffield United might panic and somebody might come available that they think can help Sheffield United get that push. It could end up being Moyes, actually, even though he's not on this list. They have no reason to sack him now, but that would be the kind of person that like a Sheffield United would bring in like a week after he gets sacked from West Ham. He's now the Sheffield United manager. They get a new manager bounce. he looks like he can coach a nice attacking team. They stay up by the skin of their teeth on the last day, and then the first day of the new season with a 10-year contract, they realise, oh, hang on, David Moyes is our manager. Ah, crap. And then they're stuck with him. The rest of the names down there, I can't see Ten Hag going now, but definitely, as I said, like by around Christmas or thereabouts, if you keep dropping points. Eddie Howe's not getting sacked, though. I think as long as they're in the Champions League or Europe.
I think that's a ridiculous one. That's a paper drawing one. That's one for clicks, in my opinion. I think there's this mentality that because it's, maybe they're owned by a group of people who once chopped the head off of a reporter or two. I don't know. Maybe they think that they would basically make a rash decision and sack someone. I think that's a ludicrous one. I think Eddie Howe is in good standing. I think the fans would riot at St. James's Park if they blew Eddie Howe out right now. They were ready to riot when they hired him, but I think now they'd be like, are you bleeping serious? Like, you made us deal with this guy, and then we fell in love with this guy, and now you just want to run him out of here the first time we hit a little bit of a rough patch. So, I had the second question, who will rebound? And, I think on this list, if I were going to pick one, I think it might be, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I think it might be the Andoni Iraola guy, because I think you're starting to see his imprint on that Bournemouth side. They play a good attacking football. We've already talked about Solanke and Semenyo. They have Patson Daka on the bench, so they even have more reinforcements. And then, if they could ever get the young Brooks kid back playing like he was before the cancer treatments, he was such a talent, and he looked like he offered so much to them. So, they're a side where with I even like Kluivert. Like, I like the business they've done. They just, what they need more than anything? They need to make sure that they keep hold of Lloyd Kelly till at least the end of the season, because he solidifies their back line. And I think they need to, remind the Coopers and the Lewises of the world, like, you don't need to lose your mind. You are here because you're an old cat and a veteran. Don't go picking up crazy red cards. And we can't play that way because we need you guys on the pitch. So for me, I think Iraola has the chance of maybe solidifying his job. I think Heckenbottom will be gone. I'm shocked that they haven't replaced him with anybody, like a live body. But I almost wonder if they're the type of club where they're like, we got no money. We're almost in administration. We're going back down. Why are we going to fire and pay two managers at once? Let's just pay this guy to send us down.
Yeah, I mean, they get parachute payments as well, so that might help. Maybe that's in their thinking.
Well, I mean, I think
you get money.
Yeah, we get dropped, we get money. We go back up, we get money. We get dropped, we get money. You're like, yeah, how do you think Norwich has stayed in business?
Yeah, that's a great model. No, I agree with Ariel, and I think I know it sounds stupidly cliched at this point, but there is still in England, at least in the English media, there's the idea that when you need a relegation battler, you go and you get what's his name, Neil. I don't know what black is. It's probably because I'm tired and I've done 14 hours in work. What's his name? Neil. No eyebrows. Hates Liverpool. Used to man Sheffield United.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. My brain.
Yeah, seriously. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. You get him, not Neil Lennon now, the other guy. The old guy just retired. You get him anyway. He'll come to me as soon as we end this podcast. Warnock, there you go. Yes.
You know how I always think of him? He genuinely looks like what a human version of a troll living under a bridge would look like.
Yeah, exactly. Complete with the no eyebrows. I don't know what that's about. But you get him, you get, the English heart, you get that English steel, because these foreign types don't understand the relegation battle or the real English game. But it's the clubs that are bringing in people like Iraola, who've got coach education, who have come from a different culture and said, you don't have to lump the ball into the box 20 times a game to win. You can actually pass it and stuff, that, right? And I think you're right. I think you're seeing Bournemouth players looking at what he's trying to do and going, this is actually quite good. Let's do this. I mean, if you're Solanke and you're suddenly scoring goals under this coach that you weren't consistent enough on all the other coaches, you're going to go, I'm playing for that guy. I don't want that guy to be fired. Because they're going to hire Neil Warnock, and I'm going to be chasing balls into the channels again, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's it's Leeds hiring Jesse Marsh, realizing this foreigner isn't the guy for this job, and then hiring Big Sam, and his first decision is, I got an idea. We should bench our player of the year, the goalkeeper, and go to a lifetime backup because I thought he was a pretty good backup when he played 2 matches for me at Everton. He switches keepers. The guy has 3 howlers. Now, Meslier had problems at times, but he wasn't the reason Leeds were in the relegation zone. But as soon as you come in and make that move, you basically tell everyone in the dressing room, you're really here just for you. Because you make that type of a bold move, switching keepers the first week you come in, you're basically saying, like, I'm smarter than all of you, and when we stay up, I'm going to remind everyone Big Sam did this. And, he almost did, as disgusting as it was, and it was great to see him go down. But, I'm still waiting for the stories about break glass and hire Big Sam. It hasn't worked ever, really, but yet still people do it. Well, speaking of managers who play progressive football and are kind of lauded and loved by the world, maybe not the officials, Roberto De Zerbi, Brighton manager, has gotten himself in a little bit of hot water. And I want to make sure I get these right. So I'm actually going to look down here and actually read these quotes. So after the match, he was asked his issues with the cards he gets, the red card that was given to Daoud on the pitch. He basically acknowledged, I'll paraphrase this part, that the red card was warranted based on today's rules, but that he ultimately, he played the game, and when he played, it wouldn't have been a red card. But under these rules, he can accept it. The player accepts it. We'll move on. They then followed it up with, then what was your issue with the refereeing, and why did you, proceed to argue with Andy Madley, the 4th official, which in turn led him to get the yellow? And his response was, I am honest and clear. I don't like 80% of English referees. He said, it's not a new thing. I don't like them. Can you explain more? The behavior. I don't like their behavior on the pitch. He then doubled down and said he elaborated on his feelings at the press conference. In England is the only country where when there is VAR, you are not sure the decision is right. In other countries, you have to be sure the referee is 100% right. In England, no. I am not able to understand that. And clearly he was angry. Clearly, this isn't the first run in, right? I believe last year he was hired in January or whenever it was when he came from Shakhtar Donetsk. He picked up 4 yellow cards and a red card in the second half of the season. Now, I will say it took 17 matches this year in all competitions for him to get his first yellow. But there are rumors and stories coming out today that the FA is considering charging him for these comments, similar to what they did to Klopp and Guardiola when they made kind of personal attacks against Tierney. And I think in Guardiola's case, it might have been John Brooks, the same match official that we see here giving this yellow card. So where do you side on this one? As a media guy, I want sound bites and I want managers to answer questions, right? That's the media guy in me. The realist in me says you should have bit your tongue because there's a chance that he gets a ban for this, or he just puts himself further up on the radar of these, thin-skinned match day officials, probably the nicest way. Is it too harsh when a manager starts to question with words like, dislike? Do we start to teeter then on the questioning their unbiased nature towards how they referee games? Is this about them on the pitch or their personalities?
Well, unfortunately, if you look at who's in charge of the referees in England, it's both of them are from the same bowl of soup. It's Howard Webb's personality was how Howard Webb refereed the game. It was all about him. I'm the boss, and everybody's going to look at me. I used to be a copper, don't you know? And because I was a copper, you shall bow down to my authority. And that's what the referees this season and last season seem to be going and behaving like. And you could almost imagine that's like a a referees meeting they had where he said, I've got your back. You guys are all in charge. You are more important than the game. Because I think De Zerbi's right. That is how they are acting. That's what he's talking about, not their understanding of the rules. He's not saying, when I played, referees knew what the rules were. He's saying these people are making it all about themselves. They're not making it about the game. We talk about, let's say, Pierluigi Collina, who I'm sure De Zerbi probably came up across when he was a player, who was full of authority. Like, if he looked into the camera and said, you're all going to bed now, everybody would have went to bed. Middle of a game, you just would have went, I'm not getting on Pierluigi's wrong side. But players from that era will all say he understood the game and he understood players, and he spoke to players as the professionals they were, and he spoke to managers as the professionals they were. These referees seem to be talking down to the players and the coaches. I think the yellow card for coach thing is ridiculous. It's like, you can have your disciplinary meeting, but giving a yellow card to a coach doesn't make any sense to me. And that's probably because I only ever got one red card, and that was because that's when I was a coach. Never got a yellow card or anything of the sort as a player. But De Zerbi is right. I agree with him wholeheartedly. He is going to get punished because they did that with Klopp and they did that with Guardiola, and they're not going to not do it with De Zerbi. He's not a big enough fish for them to back off. And I think he's going to do it again, and he's going to say it again. And eventually that might be the thing that gets De Zerbi to take up the Real Madrid position or a Barcelona position or something like that, or Juventus or somewhere, because he's just tired of the referees in England, because they are making it about them. And it's pure Howard Webb. Like, if I will never wish illness on anybody, but I'll make an exception for Howard Webb because he's destroying refereeing in England.
I will say I do think that it is a personality problem with the way that they talk to players, the way that they talk to, the way they act on the pitch. I think that they just show a lack of respect, and I think that's where Klopp, Guardiola, I think Mourinho at times, even though he's hard on them as well, I think he's always said, like, you can't, if I talk to them the way they talk to us, they'd throw us out or they would get us banned, yet they can talk to my players however they want. And anytime a player responds, it's always a big fight. I think you're right. I think this will be the beginning of the end for De Zerbi in England, which is sad. I've always thought that he had a bigger job, obviously, than Brighton coming. And, many think he could be in line to be Pep's successor just from the style of play he does and the way he is. He looks to me like an Italian. I mean, he is an Italian manager, but he looks to me like a guy who belongs in Italy. I feel like when Juventus or AC Milan opens back up again, I think that's the right move for him, because he could go to a place like that and put in a long shift and get himself to the point where he can really build a culture, have the finances he needs, and clearly the man can coach. But I just don't know that taking those shots in the media at the English referees is not going to help Brighton get any more calls. As we've seen clearly with how Klopp gets treated by a variety of officials, even though those same officials know that Tierney's an ass.
He's probably said to himself, we're not going to get decisions anyway because we're only Brighton, so I may as well say what I want to say because it's not going to affect us one way or the other. I will say this, if he goes to Juventus, he might be the manager that brings the Champions League back to Juventus if he's backed. That's what my Macka prediction will be about De Zerbi.
I like it. I don't want Juventus to win anything because they're Juventus.
No, I'm an Inter Milan fan, so I think he could do that.
Yeah, that would definitely be something. So talk about something. 4-4. We only got about 5-10 minutes left here, so we'll get through this one. I put the caption at the top, is this the match of the season to date? And there was part of me that made me think I shouldn't even put a question mark on the end of that, because this, to me, had just about everything as far as the makings of a football match, from controversy on the questionable initial penalty, in my opinion, given to City for the handball on Cucurella. History, when you get a 950-year-old dinosaur like Thiago Silva scoring a header, and it was a beautiful header on the corner. Sterling scoring against his old team. the back and forth nature, right up to Cole Palmer stepping up and being the guy to take the penalty against the club, who basically told him he was surplus to requirements at the end of the summer and he could go to Chelsea. Now, I love how they all spin this. Everyone at City tells you that they wanted Cole Palmer to stay. They wanted Cole Palmer to stay. Cole Palmer says, I asked Pep Guardiola if I would be a regular first teamer this year, not a regular starter, just a regular first teamer. And he told me there were no promises in life. That doesn't sound like a guy you really want to keep around. So I know Pep is one of those guys, as soon as a player says they want to leave, it's good night, the lights, and the door is that way. Don't let it hit you where the good Lord split you. But what was your biggest takeaway from this match? Does it speak more about City's frailties, or does it speak a little bit more about some of the things that Pochettino is starting to cook with and get right at Chelsea when it comes to the ingredients he's working with?
It's both. I think, as we said at the start of the show, City are looking more vulnerable than they did last year, which is to be expected when you win so much in one season. There's always a come down period. But I think this result will do more for Chelsea than if they had won it like 2 or 3-0, because then like City could make excuses. And the way Chelsea beat Spurs, they could kind of say, they caught Spurs on a bad day or whatever, or Spurs just didn't change their plans. But to grit it out and get that fourth goal in injury time from a penalty, as you say, from somebody who was rejected, that's the kind of thing that bonds teams together. So they probably went in, maybe they had a few doubts about Pochettino. I can't imagine too many, but maybe they did. And now they're starting to see that what he wants to do does work, as long as you do what he wants you to do. Because if you go off the reservation with him, you're going to be sticking out like a sore thumb. He's a very regimented systems manager, almost like a more entertaining Benitez. His players have their jobs to do, and if they do their jobs, they look great. And I think they'll come away from that bonding more, where City will go, we'll pick it up later, because they have that feel about them this season. We'll pick it up later. We'll make that result up later on. But later on never comes. That's the danger of it. It's always a few points lost when you do something like that. It was an entertaining game. It was frantic, but that suited Pochettino more than it suited City. And I think it's one of the things we've done so well against City is to make the game chaotic, because Guardiola is such a control freak. And we can see that in his press conferences, where he starts manipulating journalists' phones because they're not on the right line. Anything that makes him panic and have an anxiety attack is always going to have some measure of success. So I think Pochettino will be happier, obviously. But I think it speaks more about Chelsea. I think they're starting to figure out what Pochettino wants. But it also speaks that they can't have 500 players. They need to start trimming that particular tree down. And for City, I think they're vulnerable in a way that we can exploit if we're clever as a club.
Yeah, I think for me, the two big takeaways were, I thought that Pochettino's second half adjustments with his team were I feel like he out-managed Pep. Making the changes, bringing Mudryk on, moving Gallagher back into midfield and pushing Palmer centrally to start to pull the strings and run the game, I thought changed things the last 20 minutes. I mean, Cole Palmer was really, really good. Really good. And for me, if I'm a Chelsea supporter, where I'm most excited is we bought $115 million this and $110 million that, and a $60 million guy who can't even get on the bench, and Mudryk for $90 million and all these things. But the exciting thing for me is I think Pochettino went in and said, I want to build this thing around Cole Palmer, and they went and bought him. And to me, that's where I'd be excited. And the second thing is I think you're starting to see no player, and I'm going to say this right now, I'm going to say it again, no player is worth $115 million when they've only played matches in Portugal and had one good World Cup. But I think you're starting to see why they stumped up the money on Enzo Fernandez. Because at times, he was just as good as Rodri on the field. And we talk about Rodri being the most world-class defensive midfielder out there. I still think the jury's out on Caicedo. I still think he gets the wrong side of big players and big spots. Maybe it's too much pressure on him. and he was the guy who needed to bed in slowly, take the Fabinho approach, and if he had come to Liverpool, maybe he'd just be getting starts now, right? Because it takes you 2-3 months, and I don't think Chelsea had that time, especially after what they paid and how they did it. But the other thing, and it pains me to say it, when Raheem Sterling is playing as well as he's playing right now, he can be an absolute menace to any team because he does things from all over the pitch, and he was really, really good. So for me, it was Enzo Fernandez, Sterling, and Palmer. And then I'd probably say, and Gallagher really did look good as well. The other thing I think that's getting unlooked about this is, and I know a lot of Liverpool supporters were all in love with signing this guy, is they kind of elevated Levi Colwell so that he wouldn't leave the club. And then they gave him the big contract. And I feel like at times, Poch has been shoehorning him in to try to make him one of his guys. And he happened to not be available due to injury. And he started an actual left back and an actual right back. And he got them up wide like he did with Spurs. And all of a sudden, Cucurella and James are really making plays happen. And they're creating for the pieces. And now all of a sudden, Nicholas Jackson has balls to run into. And I just think, I still say this again and again, I think Chelsea is a striker away from not winning the league, but they're a striker away from being right back to competing for top 4, competing for the top 5. I do think they have to sell players, but if Chelsea were getting the consistent finishing that the top 6 sides get from their strikers when they're in form, they're creating the chances. And, we'll look at this real quick and then we'll get out of here. But, you look at these stats, even with 10% less possession, only 1 less shot on target, 2 more shots in total. Their pass accuracy was decent at 84%. In classic City fashion, they created 2 less fouls but picked up 2 more yellow cards. So they're creating, and every week it feels like these numbers get better and better. And that's why I will say, me and Kazi had this conversation on one of our pre-match shows, is that I think come the end of the season, that 1 point at Chelsea on the opening day might actually look like a good result on the road. And yes, we got them early, and we would have rather got them 5 weeks in when they actually weren't as confident and we were more prepared. But I think going to Stamford Bridge the second half of this campaign is not going to be anything that anyone is looking forward to. Because we all know they're vile, vile, vile supporters. It's a vile, vile stadium. But when they're good, they get behind their team. And those terraces get loud. And they love to love a manager. And this might be the most likable manager they've had in maybe since Carlo Ancelotti, right? To be honest, actually likable manager. You can only like Conte for the first 5 minutes, and then you realize, oh man, this guy's maniacal. And even if he's a winner, you don't like him. And I'm Italian, and I don't like that SOB. So, going to get you out of here on this. Please, if you haven't yet already, go to the YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button, get in there, send us a message, send us comments. If you have ideas or inputs, ways we can change up the program, please let us know. We will be continuing all of our coverage through the entire international break. So we'll have the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning coffee shows, 10 Eastern, brought to you by Reckless Coffee. We will have at least, are you guys planning to do the pod this Thursday, Macka?
I don't know. Yeah, we might have an idea. We might have a different idea because there's no games for us to talk about. And nobody wants to talk about Ireland on Saturday because we're going to lose to the Netherlands.
That's probably a good point. So we'll let you know on that show. We are going to do the fantasy show Thursday night, as we won't be back the following week with Thanksgiving show. Don't forget the Premier League panel show that comes to you live on Wednesdays. And of course, we will have our shorts, reels, and everything else that we're putting out, articles all throughout the international break. So please interact with the content. Give it a like, give it a share, subscribe. If you know a friend who you think might be interested in checking out or spending a little time with dopes like us talking footy, please bring them our way. And as always, if you would like to contribute, don't hesitate to send us a message on any of our social media platforms, as we're always looking for volunteers in all different avenues. Well, Macka, EPL show, match week 12 is in the books. You filled in admirably for the Bickler. He should be
said I'm
back
fat?
next Monday. I did
said
not.
I'm
I said
fat?
admiral. I said admirably.
It's that filled in.
Well, I mean, all right. So you changed the grooves of the chair a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But we appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to all that follow our content. We will be back next week. Have a great week, and we will see you soon.